I really thank God for this time where I could join, and it's good to know that a lot of you have joined from different places. I would just briefly like to share my testimony and how I came to the Lord. I was born, as Uncle said, I was born in a Christian family. My parents, both of my parents, were born again before my birth, and my father was a pastor in some church, and so I grew up in the church. I basically grew up in the church, and right from my childhood I used to attend church. And so I was never an atheist. I never grew up as an atheist because I believed in some kind of a God, because I had seen God work in our church, in our family. And so even before I was born again, I would pray to him. Whenever I was in a tight spot, I remember before any exam, I would pray. And so I was never an atheist. And the reason why I share this is, many of us who have been born in Christian families, when we hear about being born again, we somehow have this feeling that, well, I believe in God, and that is true. And what I would like to emphasize is, becoming a Christian is not about believing in God. An example that I would like to give is, like, I believe in, for example, if you follow football, I believe in a person called as Messi. He's a good player. I know about him. I can read about him on the internet, but that doesn't mean I know him. And similarly, when I grew up in I grew up in before I was 15, I believed in God. I knew that there is a God who exists, who created us, who can do things, and I used to pray to him. But I was not born again. I would think the best description about me would be, I was a godless person. Though I believed in God, I never knew that I needed him. I For me, he was just someone whom I go to when there's some problem or something, and otherwise I don't need him in my life at all. And this was my life till I was 15. And I constantly had a restlessness in my heart, due to which I loved playing. I loved speaking to my friends, spending time with them, because the moment I came home from all this, that restlessness used to be there. So I used to be a person who needed something to do, so that that restlessness, I don't feel that restlessness. And when I was 15 years old, my mom passed away. And we knew that she was sick for some time. So I knew that she was in a critical state. And even before I was born again, I asked the Lord. Just before she passed away, I prayed and I said, Lord, if this is your will, because the doctors had told us that she may not survive. And I said, Lord, if this is your will, this is it's good, but I just ask you that you help me to deal with the memories, because I had seen other people who lose their parents. Sometimes they find it very difficult. And I just prayed that prayer. And I would again like to remind that I was not born again at that time. So this is an unbeliever praying to the Lord, and the Lord answered my prayer. And when my mom passed away, the Lord gave me a wonderful peace in my heart. A peace as in, it never haunted me. I have seen so many people losing their loved ones, and they are haunted by those memories. Now I had grief, but I was never haunted uh, by that passing away. And most miraculously, I never had a question in my heart as to why this happened. I have seen many others who can never sort of get over the grief, because they always have this complaint like, Lord, why did this happen? Why did this happen? And somehow the Lord very miraculously never, he gave me such a peace that I never had that. And then suddenly, because my mom had passed away, somehow life became a little bit more serious. Till then, for me, life was always about fun and games and laughter and all that. And during that time, I used to read the Bible, because my parents forced me to. Right from my childhood, I had the habit of reading the Bible, and especially reading Proverbs according to those dates. Every day I used to read one proverb, and I just kept reading the Bible after my mom passed away. And during those 3 to 4 months after my mom's passing away, the Lord suddenly became a real person to me. And for the first time, I started knowing him as a person. Before that, I knew about him. Now I started knowing him. It is as if making friendship with a real person. And that was the first time when God became real to me, and I entered into a relationship with him. And so I would the reason I'm sharing this is because most of us who are born in Christian families, we believe in the Lord because we've seen him work in our family. We go to him in prayer, but that does not mean we are born again. Being born again is knowing him personally. When you know the Lord as a friend, and when he becomes real to you, when God doesn't become someone whom you have read about, but he becomes a person who is like, if you ask me about my father, if you ask me about my friends, I know them. I have seen them. I remember somewhere, I think in 1 John, John the apostle says that we handled him, we knew him, we heard him, and that is a reality, that the Lord should become real to us. I think that is one way I would say what is being born again is the Lord really becomes someone you know. And that happened to me when I was 15 years old. And later on, many years later, I realized that, or rather a few years later, I realized that if my mom did not pass away at that time, if the Lord did not take her, I would never be born again. I don't think I would ever come to the Lord. And today when I look back, I see that the Lord used something that might seem very terrifying, that seems very bad, but he used it for something that was his plan all along. And that's why what I wanted to share today was from Romans chapter 8 verse 28. And I think we all know this verse. We have heard it many times in the church. The verse says, and we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. And in every situation in our life is something that the Lord has designed in order to draw us closer to himself. And these situations also involve some situations which might be very painful, or rather situations that we might not have an explanation to. We do not understand why this has happened, and yet the Lord has allowed it so that we know him better. Today when I look back, I know that it is because of that painful situation I came to the Lord. And today I am thankful. I can honestly thank the Lord, that Lord, thank you, you allowed that situation in my life, and today I know you. And that is such a valuable, such a precious thing. So I would really like to encourage any of you who have gone through really difficult situations, perhaps losing a loved one or any other situation which is very, very painful. The Lord has a purpose. The Lord will never allow any situation in our life without a purpose, because he has a plan for us. And not just that he has a plan for us, I can say that I have a general plan. Like most of us who are studying, we say that I want to become a doctor, I want to become a teacher, I want to become an engineer. That's what I call a general plan. But God has a very specific plan, and we can read a verse in Psalms chapter 139. Psalms chapter 139. And verse uh, verse 16, Psalm 139 verse 16, it says, your eyes have seen my unformed substance, and in your book were all written the days that were ordained for me, when as yet there was not one of them. And what this verse says is, the Lord planned every single day of my life before I was born. Before I had lived a single day, the Lord has planned out my day. That means the days that I feel are really bad days are in fact the a day which the Lord has planned. And that is why, instead of saying many times, we might, at the end of the day, we might say that today was a good day, today was a bad day. The Bible tells us this is the day that the Lord has made. It is not Satan who has planned my day, it is not my adversary, it is not an enemy, but it is the Lord who has made my day. And if that day involves suffering, so be it. Just like Job. Job was a godly person who in a day lost his wealth, he lost his children, and that day he rose up and worshiped the Lord. And that is something we can do, but that can happen only when we know the Lord. And so, all of you, I would like to encourage that right from a young age, we should have a desire that, Lord, I want to know you. And second thing that I want to share is from my testimony is we sang that song at the beginning, that when we were not looking for the Lord came looking for us. And that is something that has been very true in my life. I have read of Sadhu Sundar Singh. Sadhu Sundar Singh was a young person who had a great desire to know some God. He was a non-Christian at that time, and the Lord revealed himself to me. And I was someone who was at the exact opposite end, where I had no desire to know the Lord. And yet the Lord came. And that song, I am forever grateful that you came to seek and save the lost. Perhaps I was lost in sin, I was lost in godlessness, and yet the Lord came looking for us, looking for me. And that is something really encouraging, that even when I had no desire to know him, I never knew that I had a need for the Lord. Even then, the Lord came looking for me. And that is something that has really amazed me. When we look back on our lives, we'll see that Perhaps we never had a thirst for the Lord, and yet the Lord came looking for us. And that is one of the most amazing things, that if we know that the Lord has loved us so much, it will bring a great rest in our life. It will bring some kind of security in our life. One other thing that I would like to share is, when I came to the Lord when I was 15, I was very zealous because I had received a love for the Lord. I started knowing Him personally, and but I for the next 2 3 years of my life, I really did not make any progress, and I did not grow. Though I loved the Lord, I did not really grow, and the reason for that was, I though I began to know the Lord, I did not value this word. I did not value the Bible a lot. I used to read the Bible, but it had not become something real to me. So today, when I look back, I think that I was born again in stages. Sometimes when children are born before their time, they keep them in an incubator, and it is only some time later that they are allowed to go home with their parents. And sometimes when I look back at my new birth experience, I see that I was a very sick child in an incubator for a long, long time. But the Lord did not give up, and the Lord carried out that whole process of birth. But it took a long time. And 3 years after I was born again, somehow the Lord gave me a desire to read the Bible, and this was a new desire. Like, it was for the first time I started reading the Bible, and I really took it seriously, that this is God's word for me. And over a period of years, I found that suddenly my spiritual life became more alive. I can't describe it in words, but this became even more and more real. Even though God had become real to me, all the things of that I was hearing in the church suddenly became more real, because I started reading His word. And it was a few years later that I received a new faith, and this faith was that this book is a book that the Lord has written for me, and I could receive something from that. Till that time, reading the Bible was like a chore for me. Well, you read the Bible; it's a ritual. Every day you should read it. But then, some years later, I received this faith that the Lord can speak to me through this word, and that suddenly changed so much, because then I started reading the Bible with an expectation that the Lord will speak to me. And so I would like to encourage any of you, irrespective of where we are in our Christian life. Perhaps you may not even be born again, but this is a good thing that when we read the Bible, we can just ask the Lord, Lord, do you want to speak to me through this? And I am sure that you will see that the Lord starts speaking to you through His word, and that will, through that, you can really develop roots in your life. And basically, this was my testimony of how I came to the Lord, and especially how, after reading the word, that the Lord became more and more real to me. And then I think now, when I look back, that is when my Christian life started, because then the Lord started speaking to me regularly. He started correcting me, He started encouraging me. Earlier, I did not know what to do when I was discouraged. Now, when I am discouraged, the Lord invariably reminds me of a verse from the Bible. And of course, sometimes there are 2 3 days when I'm still discouraged. But when I go to the Lord, and the Lord suddenly reminds me something, and it's a refreshing thing. Suddenly, that discouragement goes away, that gloom goes away. Sometimes there's anger against some person. The Lord speaks through His word, and it becomes easier to forgive. So there is something about this book, because the Lord Himself wrote it. And so, if we value the word of God, we'll see that slowly our life starts changing. um, this was something that the Lord did in my own life. And now, something that I would like to share is, how does the Lord use trials and disappointments in our life, in our walk with Him? So I remember when I finished my studies, I was preparing for a certain exam, and that exam was required to be eligible to teach in a college. And I spent some years spending time for that exam, and then I hadn't cleared it. And that was a time when I was very disappointed and discouraged, because I was not clearing an exam, and I was repeatedly failing, even though I had really worked hard. But I kept failing again and again, and it was, in a sense, very discouraging for me. And I remember when people used to ask me, well, what are you doing now? I used to say, I'm still preparing for that exam. And they say, well, you finished your studies a few years back, right? And it was very disappointing, because people would look at me, and they used to expect, well, by now, someone he should have a job, he should start earning. And by God's grace, after a few years, after a few attempts, I cleared that exam. And then when I got a job for the first time, I got a job in a college in Nasik, which is considered to be a very reputed college, because people don't usually get admissions very easily. So people think it's a big college, it's a reputed college. And then when people used to ask me, well, what are you doing now? I used to tell them I'm working. Where are you working? I used to tell them I'm working in such and such a college. And when it happened 3 4 times, I used to notice their reaction, and their reaction was that they would be like, oh, he's working in that college, like. And I used to feel very happy. And when it happened like 3 4 times, the Lord asked me, well, do you think I am more pleased with you today when you got a job? And that was something that really changed my view, that the Lord is not more pleased with me when I clear an exam, when I get a job. People respect us based on our possessions, based on our position, based on our capabilities. But the Lord has loved us, as we read in Psalm 139, his eyes beheld my unformed substance. Before I had done anything for him, before I was even born, the Lord loves us. In fact, one of the verses says that he has loved us with an everlasting love. Before the foundations of this world were laid, he chose me. And so, no exam or no job, a good job, doesn't make me more acceptable in his eyes. And sometimes, as young people, we really struggle when we see others getting jobs. I saw many of my other people of the same age. They used to get jobs, they were getting married, and I still hadn't got a job. And that time it would really disturb me. But today I have come to that point where I see that the Lord doesn't view this as something special. The Lord is interested in me. And so if I know him, I can have that security that my Father loves me. And this security can come only when we know him, and the Holy Spirit brings that in our heart, that the Lord loves us, the Lord is my Father. And today I have come to the place where, suppose I lose my job tomorrow, I know that that doesn't change what God thinks about me. And if everybody else in the world thinks that something is, oh, he doesn't have a job, he has not cleared this, he has not done that, it doesn't matter, because the Lord loves me yet. The Lord still loves me. And if we really, if this truth, if we are gripped by it, it will bring a lot of security in our hearts, especially in this age, which is so competitive. Clearing exams is difficult. You keep working hard, you don't get a job. Well, the Lord loves you in all that, and the Lord has a wonderful plan for you. And the Lord will provide us with a job, with our he'll help us he'll help us with our education. But he's more interested in our spirit and what is happening inside our spirit. And so in all these pressures, we can trust in him. uh, Another thing that I would like to share is, many times when we come to the church as young people, especially as young people, uh, uh, who are not yet married, let's say 20s to 30s, and we don't know what is our role in the church. And we are really, sometimes we wonder that, we hear about ministry, we hear about serving the Lord, and we feel that, at least I used to feel that, I don't know if there is something that I can do. Even after the church ends, we see that there are families in the church, there are elders in the church, and sometimes we see that every one of them has some kind of a role. And I used to feel that I have no role. So something that the Lord has taught me in these last few years of what is our role in the church, I would like to share with you. One thing I feel that all of us who are young can do in the church, and something through which the Lord blesses us a lot, is we can help out in the church physically. What I mean is, all our church meetings, wherever we meet, there is some kind of cleaning to be done, there is some kind of chair arrangement to be done, there is something to be done physically. And you will say, well, how is this a ministry? So I would like to show you two verses which are about two people who did a great ministry in the Old Testament. One of them is in 2 Kings chapter 3 verse 11. 2 Kings chapter 3 verse 11. This verse is about Elisha, and Elisha was one of the greatest prophets in the Old Testament. And this verse says, Jehoshaphat said, is there not a prophet of the Lord here, that we may inquire of the Lord by him? And one of the king of Israel's servants answered and said, Elisha the son of Shaphat is here, who used to pour water on the hands of Elijah. So before Elisha became a prophet, he was doing something very ordinary. He was serving others who were there. And so many times I feel that we as young people, one thing that we can do is, we can go early in the church and help out physically. And one day, if we are faithful in this small thing, the Lord will give us another ministry where we can spiritually bless others. Another example is from First Samuel, another great prophet in the Old Testament, that was Samuel. And we read in 1 Samuel chapter 3 verse 15. It says, so Samuel lay down until morning. Then he opened the doors of the house of the Lord. That means when he was small, one of his duties was just go and open the doors of the temple. It's such an insignificant thing, but he was faithful in that ministry. And later on, the Lord gave him a ministry. So, this is one thing I feel that we, especially young people, can do. Because imagine, like tomorrow, 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, you're married, you have a family, you may not be able to come to the church very early and help out other brothers. Now, when you have less responsibility, see, we can go to the church 1 hour early, we can go half an hour early. There is no responsibility as we just we can go and help out. So, if we are faithful in this thing, in this small thing, the Lord will help us to. The Lord will give us a spiritual ministry. And another thing that this does is this will help us to get rid of sometimes in the church we can have a selfish mentality, like I go to the church to get something, I go to the church to get something. If we serve instead, the Lord will give us a mind, the Lord will give us a heart where we are interested in serving others. It really helps us in overcoming our own selfishness. And the second ministry that I would like to share is there are many children in the church, and if we have every Sunday after the meeting, when we are having lunch, when we have some time where people are chit chatting, one something that the Lord has opened my eyes to in the last few years is we can spend time with the young children. I am not talking about taking the teens meeting, taking the Sunday school. Okay, if we are given that responsibility, good enough. But I am talking about just spending time with those young children and speaking to them. It's not that difficult if we just ask them, hey, how was your week? Sometimes young children like to talk and just they might tell you about what happened in their school assembly. Now, we are not interested in their school assembly, but we are interested in them. See, today many times we think that how can I go and encourage a young child? I have nothing. I don't know the Lord well enough to encourage someone. Okay, 5 years down the line, when you have grown in the Lord, you have matured in the Lord, and you have something to share, but if you do not have that relationship with a young person, how will you go and share with him? Then it would become like a very superficial thing. So if we spend our time with those children, playing with them, laughing at their jokes, listening to what has happened. I remember one of the one young boy in our church, in his 12th standard, he scored really bad marks. Like he scored something like 46%. And when he came to the church next Sunday, the whole he was not even willing to lift up his head and look at someone. And at the end of our meeting, our elder brother went to him and he said, well, congratulations, you broke my record. I scored just 43% in my 12th standard. And I could literally see that that did something for him. I mean, it's such a small thing. There is no sermon to be given. There is no like, hey, you know that God, nothing. Like, just encourage him. It's okay. Imagine what he must have faced that whole week when he talks to his friends. The results are out. Hey, I scored 90%. I'm going to be an engineer. I scored 95%. I'm going to be a doctor. And here is someone who's so. These are small things when we can invest in these young children. And when we say that the church is a body of Christ, in body, recently Sunil Punan shared something that inside in a body there are just tendons that cover the joints. Sometimes our job might be very simple, where we can just speak to them and encourage them for 5 minutes. Hey, you had your exam last week, how was your exam? Oh, you find it difficult? Well, I found maths difficult always. So these are small things by which we can encourage them and we can win their hearts. What this will do is, the young children in our church should feel that the church is their home. We sing a song in the church that blessed home in the church I have found. Now, when we have grown up, it is very easy to find a home in the church because we receive so much from the elders. But think of young children who come to the church. They are not yet born again, so they might not really be interested in spiritual things. But if you, as a young person, just go, in fact, I don't know this in English language, but in all Indian languages, I feel that when you see young children and when they see a person who is crossed like 30, who is married, they instinctively use the word uncle. And but for someone who is younger than 30, in Hindi they use a word called bhaiya. In Tamil they might use a word called anna or didi or akka, something like that. So see, this is a time when the young people are closer to us in their age, and we can very easily become friends with them. And tomorrow we might be able to win them for the Lord. So I think this is a ministry where, which is specifically where we as young people can spend time with them. And I have in the last few years, before that I used to go to the church selfishly, and I never helped out in the church or never did this. But in the last few years, when the Lord has helped me to do this, spend time with them, I have been encouraged. There's a verse in Proverbs that says, he who waters others is watered himself. When you spend time with those young children, we don't know what pressures they are going through. Sometimes they are, all their friends might be ridiculing them because of their appearance, because of perhaps they're not smart enough. See, they should find a safe place in the church where they see that all of Jesus loved us when we were sinners. Jesus loved us when we were not interested in them. Perhaps young people in our young children in our church are not interested in the Lord, but we can still love them. We can show them that love. It's not that we always discuss spiritual things with them and we encourage them. Perhaps we don't have that gift, we don't have that grace, but we can serve as simple, we can be tendons where we just cover that joint. There are some rough places and we cover that, and it becomes a wonderful thing. Tomorrow these children will remember these small interactions that they have had, and they will see that the church was my home. And so these were two things that I have really been challenged by, that we as young people can do a role in the church. And so finally, I would just like to say that many times we might be discouraged, especially after being born again for a few years, when we see that there is no change, or we feel that others have really grown and we have not grown so much in our life. So I would just like to read a verse at the end, and that is from Philippians chapter 1 verse 6. This is a verse that has encouraged me many a times. When we look at our life and we see that we have not really grown in the Lord, this is something that should encourage us. That Philippians chapter 1 verse 6 says, for I am confident of this very thing, that he who began a good work in you will perfect it until the day of Christ Jesus. And it is the Lord who has begun a good work in us. Whenever we are discouraged, we can just look back and say, has the Lord started a work in me? Did I ever feel that I am a sinner and I went to the Lord and the Lord forgave me? That means the Lord has started a good work in me. And it doesn't say that you complete this work. It says that the Lord will fulfill it. And the Lord will indeed fulfill whatever he has started in our life. And we will become not just people who know the Lord, but we'll become useful people in the church. And the Lord will bless others using us. And that is a faith that we can have. And so that is all I wanted to share.